into the fractured lands. From the Killer and Keeper universe, the sky bleeds amber and violet as dawn breaks over the dunes. A desert wind stirs the sand into gentle spirals, whispering of ruin and revelation. Atlas, a god among men in this world, rises slowly from where he knelt. Blood and soot crusted on his skin like the remains of a pyre. His once gilded cloak hangs heavy with grit and ash, the hem torn and scorched. The ridge beneath him glows faintly in the light, not with magic, but with the remnants of war. Lightning glass, formed where his fury struck the earth, cracks and glitters at his feet. His silhouette stands alone against the blazing horizon, a hulking figure carved of dusk and shadow. Behind him, his elongated shadow stretches like the weight of memory itself, trailing across the dunes like a wound in the world. He does not speak. He does not look back. He begins to walk, alone, into the endless sands. Far below the ridge, smoke rises like black veins against the horizon. In the fractured kingdoms beyond, the surviving zealots of Atlas's warpath descend with fanatical purpose. From the sun-drenched hill cities of Thal-Veren, where flowering terraces once echoed with music and parables of peace, now gutted, the parables seared into the flesh of dying priests, to the overgrown jungle temples of Mirosyn, where sacred pools boil with the blood of slaughtered acolytes, and the air reeked of charred sinew, to the crumbling marble coastlines of Ferythran, where waves foam red, and the tortured remains of dissenters are crucified on sea-bound pylons. Broken nations now burn. Yet in each, a shadow of the old regimes lingers. In Thal-Veren, remnants of the once beloved Petal Court, ministers of music, law, and lore, gather in the catacombs, drafting counter-edicts in soot and teaching philosophy to feral orphans. In Mirosyn, shattered priesthoods convene in root-hidden sanctuaries, merging their dissolved rites into hybrid creeds that offer solace and spark among the ruins. Along Ferythra's coast, former magistrates and storm-fleeing admirals form clandestine tribunals, issuing covert justice and dispatching whisper agents to infiltrate zealot ranks. These embers of former governance flicker on, stubborn against the winds of devotion and fire. Yet in shadowed valleys and beneath scorched ruins, quiet resistance festers. In the cave-marked highlands above Thal-Veren, rebel scribes and shepherds etch warnings into stone walls with blood and bone ash, teaching children to sing the old parables in coded lullabies. Hidden jungle enclaves in Mirosyn preserve ritual dances meant to veil messages in motion. Each step a warning, each gesture a survival map. Along Ferythra's coast, fisher clans build false shrines filled with decoys and flammable oils, luring zealots into traps that burn as fiercely as any sermon. The world still bleeds, but not in silence. It learns to hide its heart, to fight beneath its breath, to whisper the old gods' names in the spaces between thunderclaps. In Thal-Veren, the zealot priestess Virel, once a healer in the Court of Blossoms, now brands the living with molten sigils of devotion, her followers dragging nobles into the flower gardens to have their tongues torn out for seditious silence. The screams echo beneath the hill domes, unanswered by a sky that no longer weeps. In Mirosyn, the jungle burns under the wrath of the masked war mystic, known only as the Scaled Seer, whose robes are stitched from the hides of fallen temple guardians, and who feeds insurgents to carnivorous plants grown in sacrificial soil. Their bones are left polished, and standing like pale statues of warning. Ferythran, meanwhile, collapses beneath the sermons of Archon Mirosyn, a philosopher-turned-butcher who holds mass executions atop the sun-bleached cliffs. Once a devout scholar of harmonic law and celestial ethics, Mirosyn's mind fractured after a blighted pilgrimage to the drowned library of Careth's deep. A sunken reliquary sealed beneath thunder-racked tides, where the preserved corpses of drowned archivists whispered secrets through bubble runes and salt-fractured bones. Within its barnacle-crusted vaults, he encountered a relic known as the Echo Heart, a pulsating, semi-organic crystal that bled brine and glowed with stormlight. They say it sang in his presence, a melody of screams and static that no one else could hear. Its presence gnawed into his thoughts, its pulses aligning with his heartbeat, until he could no longer distinguish his mind from its rhythm. There, Mirosyn claimed to have glimpsed the storm's truth, that mercy was a lie birthed by the weak to delay the righteous, and only by unmaking the flawed could the divine order be restored. He returned with eyes ringed by sleepless ink, preaching a doctrine where pain was clarity, and cleansing came only through the flaying of false prophets. Victims are now drained of blood into basalt basins, their skulls hollowed and strung from temple arches as bells of penance, chiming only in the wind. Each becomes a legend of terror, reshaping belief with blade and fire. Once peaceful towns like Israel's Hollow and Renhall Keep fall beneath the blades of crusaders who whisper Atlas's name as they immolate the old god's effigies, stuffing the mouths of statues with burning entrails, painting chapel walls with sacrificial blood, and feeding orphans the ashes of their own ancestors. But not all is thunder and ash. On the still banks of the river Sareth, where willows bend over glassy waters untouched by war, an old chronicler named Halden waits. Beneath the eaves of a half-collapsed library, its walls scarred with claw-like scorch marks and its staircases littered with the shattered bones of former scribes. He lights a single candle each dusk and reads aloud from weathered scrolls, not to an audience, but to memory. His voice, though cracked, carries through the silence, and sometimes birds settle in the rafters to listen. Some nights, he pauses mid-verse, eyes drifting toward the bloodied scribbles on the floor, sigils etched in fingernail scrapes by the dying, their final messages lost to soot and time. He reads of constellations that once guided empires, of harvest rites and dances now forgotten, and of a sister who never returned from the Whispering Coast, whose last known message, written in blood upon torn parchment, merely read, "Beware the echo beneath the waves." In moments when the fire dies low, he touches the worn amulet beneath his robe, a relic of the old gods now tarnished, its symbols half erased by time and ash. Sometimes he prays to it, sometimes he whispers to Atlas instead, and sometimes he does neither, unsure if faith is an anchor or a chain. No lightning finds him here, only the occasional drip of rain through fractured stone, and the warmth of a fire kindled from books too ruined to save. Some still weeping wax from melted seals that once marked holy texts. Villages in Dunkara, a kingdom once revered for its scholars and scribe monks, are transformed into slaughterhouses. Scroll vaults become ovens, their ancient parchments igniting with the screams of those forced to eat the verses written in flame. Astronomers are dragged from their observatories, nailed by the wrists to inverted star maps, their entrails draped across sundials like ribbons of red prophecy. The towers that once touched the heavens now hang with bodies, swaying like pendulums over cobbled lanes dyed black from charred ink and arterial spray. Among the horror, one girl, barely 12, soot-faced and barefoot, clings to the base of a crumbled observatory, hidden in a crawl space between splintered beams and a shattered orrery. Her name is Sally, the last apprentice of the slain high astrologer. Beneath her trembling hands, clutched against her ribs, is a cracked slate, etched with constellations her master once traced beneath candlelight. Through a jagged hole in the wood, she watches a zealot carve a spiral of flame into a fallen scribe's back. Hears the wet rasp of breath from someone dying nearby. She does not cry. She counts stars in her head to stay sane. Each name she remembers is a tether to knowledge, to identity, to defiance. Someday, she promises the silent dead, the sky will speak again, and she will remember how to listen. In the gutters, brass astrolabes lie twisted around the severed fingers of their former wielders, fingers broken backwards, each knuckle inscribed with mockeries of celestial wisdom. The famed Star Reckoner of Kalaskure lies not only split in two, but defiled, its halves used as blades to flay the minds of surviving sages who gibber prophecies in blood and bile from cracked lips. The triumph here is not merely over knowledge, but sanity. Blind faith cackles as cosmic understanding is reduced to gibberish. In the inner cloisters, once fragrant with oils and sacred ink, zealots now scroll verses of war and thunder in a slurry of soot and pulped brain matter. The night bell, once rung in joy at celestial marvels, now groans endlessly, its bronze cry bent from being used as a blunt weapon. The courtyard where students once traced stars is now a pit of limbs, bones stacked like firewood, and a pyre of burnt tomes crackling beneath a sky that no longer recognizes its own constellations. In Caithwin, where artisans once forged stained glass for sky temples, the glass now reflects only flame and the twisted reflections of the dying. Among those lost is Master Veril Thorn, a visionary glazier whose mosaic visions, known as the windlit prophecies, once shimmered with shifting hues to foretell omens upon the dawn light. These works were more than art. They were divine instruments, both revered and reviled. The flamebinders saw them as sacred truths veiled in color, while others, like the Dunecloaks, condemned them as heretical illusions. Politicians sought to interpret them to justify edicts, while zealots branded them witchlight. Even among the scholarly circles of Caithwin, debates burned over their authenticity, yet their influence lingered in every high hall and hidden shrine. To destroy them was to erase a lens through which a fractured world glimpsed its fate. His final masterpiece, the Prism of Arrival, was said to hold a vision of Caithwin's final days, but it is now shattered beneath the boots of zealots, its shards driven into the faces of apprentices, forced to watch it destroyed. Some screamed for mercy, others recited fragments of the windlit prophecies as protective incantations, their voices trembling against the roar of flame. One apprentice, clutching a mosaic shard as if it were a blade, lunged at the zealots before being silenced with a hammer's blow, her blood painting the prophecy's edge. Another tried to flee, but slipped in molten pigment, her final moments a kaleidoscope of color and agony. None were spared, and their last rites became chaos and broken glass. The mountain workshops are torn open, their kiln fires stoked with holy manuscripts and limbs alike. Stained glass windows are ripped from their frames and melted into molten pools, then poured onto captives whose screams echo through the burning valleys. Among the victims was Ferythran, a master of fractal glass layering, known for capturing shifting winds in motion within static pain. Her final piece, the Breath of Dusk, lay half-fired in the forge when the zealots arrived. She stood defiant, smeared in ochre and violet dust, proclaiming that no flame could unmake truth, forged in light. They flayed her slowly, piece by piece, using glass blades honed from her own work, until her voice rasped prayers through bloodied teeth. The pigments, once ground from rare crystals and sacred herbs, now coat the floors in blood-streaked patterns, mixed with the skin and bone fragments of artists flayed for aesthetic heresy. In the years since, whispers speak of the cult of the Dusk Breath, a clandestine sect formed by surviving artisans and wanderers who claim to receive visions when staring into fractured glass under moonlight. They wear violet-dusted robes in her memory and pass down shards of her unfinished masterpiece as relics. Among their number, it is said, her final scream echoes still, guiding their steps in the twilight hours. The sky temples themselves, suspended by ether-stone bridges, collapse in arcs of thunder and smoke, their monks ignited in mid-prayer, robes clinging as molten brands to spasming flesh. As the flames consumed them, they chanted the canticle of falling stars, a sacred hymn once sung during celestial alignments. Their voices, ragged and trembling, rose in broken harmony. Let the heavens break before the soul does. Let the light rise from ash. Some leap into the abyss willingly, their skin already sloughing from their bones, leaving trails of fire in the sky, like flaming benedictions written across the void. In the aftermath, a lone acolyte, burned blind in one eye, was found wandering the cliff paths days later, muttering the hymn to the wind. His recounting preserved the chant, and in time it became a whispered legend among outcast monks and hidden libraries, recited not in worship, but in mourning, as if invoking the last light of lost sanctity. And above it all, the bells of Caithwin toll, not by hand, but by wind pushing through ruptured towers, their notes warped into groans, like mourning gods howling over a cathedral of ruin. Locals now whisper that the bells carry more than wind, that their tones echo with the voices of the dead, uttering names of the next to perish. Some say the groans prophesy future desecrations, that each chime is a harbinger of a shrine to fall, a light to be extinguished. No one dares silence them, fearing the silence might be worse. Zealots chanting, Lord of Lightning, Demon of the Frozen Wastes, the Conqueror of the Magma Fields, the Sky's Wrath. Across the ranks of Atlas's crusaders, splinter cults emerge, fanatics seeking to outdo one another in acts of sacred violence and twisted piety. The Ash-Forged, whose armor is scorched black from self-immolation rituals, believe fire to be the only language the god of storms hears. The Hollow Eyes of Heaven, a pilgrimage sect of blind zealots, claim to see Atlas's will in bolts of lightning that scar the ground. Even among these horrors, the choir of riven tongues stands apart, a brotherhood that sears their vocal cords with molten coins so they may scream only in thunderous silence. Despite their shared devotion, these factions rarely find unity. The ash-forged despise the Hollow Eye's passivity, seeing blindness as weakness rather than divine vision, while the choir of riven tongues denounces both as defilers of true thunder. Tensions boil during sacred festivals, where rival hymns spiral into chaotic clashes, and relic disputes erupt into blood-soaked rites of supremacy. Occasional alliances devolve into treachery. Throats slit mid-prayer, allies immolated during joint sermons. Among Atlas's chosen, faith itself becomes a battlefield. It is in the blistered highlands of Vorth Kaloon that their fanaticism is tested in full. There, the choir clashes with the Storm Reckoners in a cataclysm known as the Hymn War, a 3-day slaughter over a shrine believed to house a fossilized word once spoken by Atlas himself. The air shrieks with discordant miracles, winds sharp enough to peel flesh from bone, hymns that reverse time mid-sentence, causing foes to relive their deaths again and again. The Storm Reckoners chant dirges that cause eyeballs to rupture from the inside out, while the choir's silent thunder blasts collapse lungs with invisible shock waves. The battlefields reek of cooked blood and glass. Corpses fuse with molten obsidian as lightning forks downward in spirals, engraving scorched glyphs into the hillsides. The climax comes when the sky, unable to hold the wrath any longer, splits open and rains obsidian shards for hours, razored flakes that carve warriors to bone, flensing armor and soul alike. When silence returns, the shrine is rubble, its relic lost, its keepers vaporized mid-chant. The land remains blackened and barren, a scar of unburied screams, while the sky overhead bears a permanent thunder ring, a blazing halo of wrath never spent. Zealots chanting, Lord of Lightning, Demon of the frozen wastes, the conqueror of the magma fields, the sky's wrath. Queen Inara of Thal-Veren is dragged from her citadel, clutching the last blossom from her ancestral garden, a rare moon petal said to bloom only once each reign, its petals luminescent under moonlight and believed to carry the blessings of the first matron. Tradition held that the bloom's survival marked the queen's divine favor, and that when pressed to parchment, its scent would reveal hidden truths. Prophecies even whispered that a moon petal preserved in martyrdom could one day spark rebellion. As the zealots crush her crown beneath their boots, they also stamp the flower into the bloodied stones, petals mingling with gore as the moon petal liquefies under iron soles. Its glowing essence seeps into the cracks of the courtyard, flickering briefly before vanishing beneath the ruin. With her final breath, Inara, the Queen of Blooming Arches, whispers, "Let no song of mine serve thunder." Her voice is drowned by the hiss of a blade dragged across marble, severing her hand as it still clutches her broken crown. She is struck down beside the mural-lined fountains of her ancestral court, her blood painting over scenes of peace and diplomacy. Her eyes are pried open, filled with shards of glass petals, so that she might see the truth of flame as the zealots chant. Her body is hung upside down from the court's weeping fig trees, entrails swaying like crimson garlands, a spectacle of warning. In Mirosyn, jungle monasteries are gutted, their sacred statues defaced with lightning sigil brands. Monks are flayed and nailed to the altar steps, their faces burned into mask-like grins. The temples burn under the thick canopy, black smoke mingling with incense to choke the skies. Warrior priests of the old sun god fall one by one, their relics shattered and used as blunt instruments to silence chants. In the highland sanctuaries of Caithwin, elders are drowned in sacred wells that once reflected the skies in peace. As the water fills with blood and shattered bone, the surface no longer mirrors the heavens but churns with crimson tides and chunks of hair and teeth. The wind chimes forged by generations of Sky Temple monks, tuned to harmonize with celestial alignments, fall silent beneath shattered steeples and severed limbs. In the absence of their song, a strange resonance lingers, a low, dissonant hum that creeps through the valleys at dusk. Some claim it is the sound of the heavens grieving. Others say it is the final note of broken harmony, repeating endlessly in the ears of the dying and the mad. In Ferythran, poets and philosophers are nailed to their own library doors with spikes forged from shattered quills, broken compass needles, and shards of their ink-stained spectacles. Their bodies hang limp, backs arched unnaturally, heads twisted toward the heavens, beneath scrolls that blacken and crumble in rising flame. Their mouths, split at the corners, are stuffed with charred pages of their own writings, tongues pinned with their signatures. The wind carries the scent of seared parchment and boiling ink. Among them is Serian Val, last master of the luminous paradox, a school of thought that taught harmony between storm and soul, a philosophy outlawed for refusing the singular divinity of Atlas's storm. His eyes are torn out and replaced with obsidian inkwells, crusted in dry ink, and black tears stream endlessly down his cheeks. His scalp is peeled into a crown of flayed quotations, his skull engraved with excerpts from banned treatises. His final work, The Mind That Does Not Bow, is torn to shreds, soaked in bile and blood, stitched into the skin of condemned scribes, then cast into the sea, bound to his severed tongue, wrapped in rusted wire. The famed hanging archives collapse in flames, their chain libraries igniting like a cage of fire, and their wind-hung corridors howl with a chorus of incinerating knowledge. Scrolls unravel mid-air, turning to ash before they touch the ground. Quills stab through parchment like blades, and ancient tomes bleed ink that sizzles on the marble steps. The marble keys run red with a torrent of ink and blood, the two fluids swirling together into viscous rivulets that reflect burning stars. An ocean of extinguished thought devoured by flame and storm. In Dunkara, the great observatory burns with a lightless fire that consumes reflection but leaves shadow. Scribe monks are forced to kneel and cast their own star charts into the pyres, their hands broken and mouths sewn shut with constellation thread. Celestial globes are shattered, and the brass gears of ancient astrolabes are melted into brands used to mark heresy upon the monks' foreheads. Yet amid the destruction, a small cadre of acolytes escapes through the catacomb tunnels beneath the observatory, clutching scorched fragments of star maps and the cracked lens of the ancient stellar kine, a relic said to chart not only the heavens, but the souls of the wise. These stolen remnants are hidden in a grove of petrified trees, their bark carved with equations and celestial hymns. The once celestial kingdom of knowledge becomes a funeral pyre of wisdom, its towers collapsing under the weight of lost futures. The stars above now weeping trails of smoke, as if mourning the erasure of their names. Frightened whispers rise from the ruins of each shattered nation. In shadowed hollows and forgotten crypts, survivors begin to etch the truth into stone and bone. wandering lore keepers and grief-marked bards carve forbidden chronicles, martyr songs, resistance glyphs, and whispered names of the fallen into the backs of broken idols and the roots of old trees. These secret histories, passed in hushed verse and coded light, begin to coalesce into a memory underground, a defiant archive of what once was and what the storm could not erase. In the high tundra kingdom of Vareth Kor, famed for its stormsmiths and living metal forges, the mountain citadels fall one by one. The last of the sky-forged guardians, Sir Garuf Stormmantle, holds the bridge of Argentspire Pass for 6 days before being overwhelmed by zealots led by Inquisitor Vylan Crowbrand. Once a humble forge master, known for crafting sky-steel filigree for ceremonial blades. After witnessing the incineration of his family during the First Thunder Rite, an event he claimed was a divine judgment upon his household's vanity, Crowbrand wandered the broken peaks for 40 nights, clad only in soot and grief. It is said he heard the voice of Atlas in the cracking of stone beneath frozen rivers, and that he returned bearing sermon tablets, hammered from his own burned anvil. Now a martyr preacher of brutal devotion, his doctrine exalts purification through pain and tempering through loss. His sermons are etched in molten iron and driven into the skulls of converts, their scalps split to bear the burning word. Where he marches, the wind sings dirges through the hollows of crucified stormsmiths, and the echo of hammer on altar becomes prophecy. Among his followers, these dirges are interpreted in myriad ways. Some believe they are sacred judgments, echoing from Atlas himself, while others take them as trials through which their faith is forged, like tempered metal. A few whisper that the songs are laments from the god's broken heart, warning of a divine order unfulfilled. The ambiguity becomes doctrine. Each convert hears what they need: condemnation, affirmation, or a call to further wrath. In the jungle-blighted lowlands of Zal Torun, the warrior queen Nayari of the Verdant Blades fights beneath canopies alight with fire, her emerald war mask shattered as she is slain defending the grove of first roots. Her killer, the zealot known only as the Ember Tongue, claims to speak only after bathing his mouth in ash, and marks each fallen hero with a sigil drawn in flame and bone. These sigils, burned into battlefield soil or carved into scorched bark, are said to linger with unnatural heat for weeks. Some believe the symbols whisper when no one watches, foretelling calamity or awakening long-dead memories. Villagers avoid them, claiming those who stare too long are haunted by dreams of burning rivers and voices clawing up from beneath the earth. Others believe the sigils are divine warnings, omens of greater purges yet to come, or seals meant to curse the land into obedience. These were not merely kingdoms of men, but realms of ancient peoples. In the emerald highlands of Teresia, a land of sweeping glass steppes and sky-lashed mesas, the glass-horned cavalry, riders clad in prism armored plate and helmed with antlers of forged quartz, gallop through a storm of black lightning. Warlord Erevan Skyhoof, his mount veined with living stormlight, leads the final charge from the shattered cliffs. There, beneath an aurora boiling with fire, the zealot bishop Amun-Vail stands with eyes of blue flame, astride a beast sewn from skin, brass, and lightning bones. Their clash rips the mesa apart. When the storm ends, Teresia is fractured, its highlands split by a permanent rift, the sky scorched in a streak that never fades. In the salt-blasted wastes of Dravir, where cities are carved from obsidian veins and glowing script dances across black vault walls. The last obsidian king, Hulzek the Black-Eyed, dons a helm of volcanic glass and wields a hammer that echoes with the voices of past rulers. He seals the Library of Echoes, where stone remembers all, behind rivers of molten stone. But the zealot twins, known as the Blade Saints, Sevrak and Selya, descend like mirrored ghosts, their weapons singing through the obsidian. They slay Halzek at the mouth of memory, shattering the crown into ash. In their wake, the crystal-lit catacombs collapse, burying millennia of memory beneath flame and ruin. Yet some whisper that not all was lost, that deep within the stone-riven depths, fragments of the Library of Echoes survived, hidden behind glyph-locked vaults and echo-sealed chambers. It is said that when the world is ready to remember, the stone will speak again, and the buried past will rise, not as history, but as weapon and warning. In the orchard realms of Valura, a land of memory fruits and singing groves, the trees twist and scream as rot spreads from root to sky. Groves that once hummed with ancestral lullabies now echo with the shrieks of wood splintering and sap boiling in agony. The groves themselves resist, lashing out in spasms of cursed growth. Thorns sharpen into serrated bone, fruit bursts into clouds of hallucinogenic spores that corrode lungs, and roots erupt from the earth like barbed serpents, dragging zealots beneath the soil where they are crushed and devoured. As the zealots advance, the air thickens with hallucinated memories, flashes of birth, love, and grief not their own, as if the forest forces each invader to live 10,000 lives before death. Bark peels back like skin, revealing pulsing wood veins filled with black ichor. Blossoms scream as they wilt. Even in death, the trees fight to be remembered. Grand Ascendant Morix, draped in rotting vestments, sewn from bark, bone, and the faces of slain druids, leads a chorus of zealots who chant in a tongue that curdles sap and causes birds to fall dead from the sky. His voice weaves through the forest like a sickness. Defender Prioress Lyatha of the Weeping Grove dons the vine-wrought mail, a living armor that writhes as it tightens, thorns piercing her own flesh in symbiosis. She summons the grove's last breath, a rotting wind of spore and scream, and charges to defend the tree of first thought, now blackened, its branches dripping rot like tears of tar. She fights until her limbs splinter, her vine armor fusing with her muscle and bone, and her spine cracks in a spray of glittering crimson. Her blood soaks the ground, where it hardens instantly into jagged crystal glass that hums with her last breath. When she falls, Morix carves open her chest with a blade of petrified thorn and feeds her still beating heart to the tree. The tree of first thought groans as if in orgasmic death throes, then erupts in a fountain of rot, birthing thorned saplings with eyes that weep tears of smoke and whisper her name through serrated leaves. In the weeks that follow, the saplings begin to crawl slowly through the grove, roots dragging like talons, their presence warping the soil. Crops planted near them grow in twisted forms, and those who sleep beneath their branches dream of Lyatha's final charge. Or worse, awaken screaming verses of her final war cry. Some believe the saplings absorb memories from the dead and bleed them into the earth, turning battlefield into prophecy. Others say they await a signal, a whisper on the wind, to rise and reclaim the forest in her name. in the canyon-bridged cities of Cardoon, where towers float on sculpted currents of aerothermic wind. Each edifice serves not just as habitation, but as sanctum, overseen by the cantors of the breath-bound creed, a ruling ecclesiastic order whose sacred law dictates the harmonic conduct of daily life. These high choristers, clad in whisper veils and woven glyph tunics, regulate tone-right rituals and levy penance for discordance. Their psalmic decrees shape law, inheritance, and spiritual purity, binding each citizen's breath to the sanctified cadence of Cardoon's ever-humming skyline. The harmonium engines, arcane relics of the resonant ascendancy, are venerated as divine hearts of the skyward sanctuaries, believed to hum with the breath of forgotten gods. Pilgrims etch prayers into the copper filigree of engine casings, while hymnsmiths maintain sacred tones through ritual tuning, fearing that disharmony might awaken slumbering wrath. These towers, their foundations sculpted from coral stone and veined with luminous chantor, form both the physical and spiritual architecture of Cardoon society, suspending not only homes, but entire creeds above the abyss. Here, belief is not whispered in temples, but sung into the wind, each note a ward, a plea, or a sentence of judgment. Of aerothermic wind and crystalline harmonics resonate through vaulted echo chambers. Navigation is not merely sight, but symphony. Towers shaped like coiled serpents and crescent moons drift lazily on gravity-bound breezes, held aloft by ancient harmonium engines. Songs, woven of breath, pitch, and memory, guide travelers across invisible paths, each note bouncing from stone to stone like pulses in a living map. Amid this ethereal citadel, the skyward sentinel Jarek of the Hollow Horn, clad in wind-woven bronze robes and crowned with antlered surmet, a mantle long worn by skyward martyrs whose deaths are sung in hushed tones across obsidian reliquaries, bears the weight of generations with each step. Beneath the ceremonial grandeur lies a man hollowed by prophecy, eyes clouded by the ache of knowing his flesh must become echo, his mind dust in the storm's hymn. His breath is already threaded with farewell. His veins thrum not with fear, but with sacred resignation. In the tolling silence before the blast, he glimpses the judgment of old skies and accepts the agony of a death that no god will sanctify, but all will remember. Ascends the storm maw, a titanic spiral of wind and force, anchored by monolithic songstones that hum with primordial resonance. His final act, a crescendo of sacrifice, sees him lift the horn of ninefold mourning to trembling lips. The blast he unleashes ruptures the sky itself, shattering sound barriers and snapping other bridges in a cataclysm of collapsing harmony. The sonic backlash tears through his skull, killing him instantly, yet grants precious moments for thousands of Cardoon citizens to flee into the high gullies and vault hollows. From above, slicing through the upper cloud sea, on spined sky drakes, bound in thunder chains, beasts whose flesh steams with perpetual lightning burns, and whose eyes drip molten amber, descend the zeal-born choir, draped in blood-slicked cerements stitched from the flayed hymns of fallen wind priests, parchments of skin inked with sacred scores and lacquered in the ash of burnt scripture. Their vestments throb with latent anguish, each fold inscribed during sacrificial rites that meld pain with psalmody, that pulse with faint choral weeping. Each rider hums a fractured canticle, their mouths sewn into grim smiles with filament thorns, their descent a grotesque procession of devotion and decay. The air twists around them, shivering with the scent of scorched myrrh and sulfur, as if the heavens themselves recoil from their blasphemous song. Comes Zealot Executor Vorid Flamehand, his entire body inscribed with rune branding, a lattice of pain and piety formed of centuries-old scars. With him, the Zealborn choir, clad in ember-dyed armor and wielding hymn blades, begin their descent. Vorid's voice projected by storm-forged amplifiers, devices not purely mechanical, but parasitic reliquaries that siphon the death cries of fallen zealots and bind them into chorus, resonates with the weight of stolen agony. Each word carries echoes of martyrs long consumed, their final breaths twisted into sonic barbs that unravel the fabric of sanctified melody mounted to his shoulders, splits the very essence of the ward songs, melodies centuries in the making, unweaving the city's defenses note by sacred note. The canyons wail as if in mourning, sacred echoes turn to screams, and one by one, the wind priests, keepers of sound and balance, are struck silent. Cardoon does not merely fall. It is unmade. Its once floating sanctuaries now lie as shattered relics embedded in the canyon floor, their broken songstones exhaling mournful, ghostly harmonics. The air itself hums with the lingering resonance of catastrophe, as if the city's soul were still trying to sing. Vines of soot-crystallized ash creep along the fallen towers, and beneath them, shadows flicker in rhythm with remembered hymns. Pilgrims who dare return speak of voices in the wind, echoes of lost prayers caught in endless lament, and faces glimpsed in sound-distorted reflections, where sacred pools once shimmered with blessing. Yet from this ruin, new power stirs. Heretical pilgrimages thread through the wreckage in search of relics. Scavenger choirs emerge, clad in patchwork hymn shrouds, proclaiming themselves heirs to Cardoon's divine resonance. Fragment cults rise in the hollows, claiming visions and miracles among the ruins, each twisting the breath-bound creed into darker, self-serving gospel. The fall of Cardoon births not silence, but 1,000 competing songs, discordant and divine, undone by blasphemous resonance and fire-born hymns. In the storm-lashed altitudes of Graldenheim, where the noble wolfkin clans once carved their citadels into crags like thunder-forged fangs, they held eternal vigil beneath skies that howled like mourning gods. These clans, shrouded in pelts, inked with sigils of sky and ice, divided by blood oaths and moonbound houses, kept a rigid hierarchy shaped by both spiritual revelation and martial lineage. The high crones of the frost tongue interpreted skyborn omens from the scream of the wind, while the Stormfangs, warrior ascendants, chosen through ritual frost duels, executed their decrees. But beneath the veneer of unity, rival creeds whispered dissent, some claiming the ancient pacts were chains forged by forgotten tyrants. It was not the enemy from beyond the peaks that shattered them first, but the frostbite of betrayal within, seers blinded by ambition, generals corrupted by forbidden glyphcraft, until the pact fractured and the cairns began to fall. The frost-packed gates, ancient thresholds veined with frozen blood and bound by worm-iron seals, their mournful dirges, sung into the stone itself, stirred the slumbering storm spirits buried deep in the marrow of the mountains. Their downfall came not in battle, but in sacrilege. The pact was broken. Skyfangs turned silent. The sacred cairns, massive totems sculpted from glacier bone and rime glass, materials harvested under blood moon eclipses and infused with the breath of the dying storm spirits, served as anchors of celestial resonance. Glacier bone, calcified remains of titanic sky beasts, buried in frost vaults, was etched with runes that only the high crones could decipher. Rime-glass, formed from glacial tears wept during the collapse of the first sky, shimmered with trapped echoes of ancestral chants. Each cairn was consecrated in rites that demanded marrow from the eldest warriors and ash from the bonfires of ancient oaths. Rituals so potent, they left the surrounding stone singing for generations, exploded beneath curses, hurled by thunder invoked by blasphemous tongues. Corin Howlbrand, great chieftain and the final speaker of the Icewind tongue, died atop the summit of echoes, as lightning carved his name into the snow-charred runes. His blood soaked the glyph once used to summon Skyfire. No banners rise here. Only wind-scoured silence and sanctified ash remain. The Wolfkin, once revered as sentinels of storm and stone, are now hunted like mythic beasts. Their broken cairns moan in the wind, howling songs of betrayal. Far below, in the drowned verdancy of Narrowfen, where willows drip with algae-tangled sorrow and dragonflies hum dirges like mournful priests, the beaver folk endure annihilation masquerading as divine ecstasy. Their dam cities, wonders of symbiotic architecture and sacred craftsmanship, are sundered in howling catastrophe. Whisperwood ribs shatter like brittle bone, and resin-bound vine-glass veins erupt into steam and shrapnel beneath a deluge of blood-warm floodwaters and scalding firestorms. The firebrands, zealots clad in scorched bronze face masks, etched with burning prayers, descend with the fury of sanctified butchery. They chant in storm tongue, every syllable a sonic flail. Their lightning-forged brands glow like molten spinal cords, searing flesh and boiling marrow with a single stroke. They do not simply breach the floodlocks. They carve blasphemous glyphs into them, unleashing torrents that tear children from the arms of the dying, inundate sanctuaries with the screams of the drowned, and mix prayer scrolls with the pulped remains of their readers. In the name of Atlas, they execute a ritual immolation of history. Villages become infernos, where families ignite like dry tinder and run flaming into canals. The air is thick with the reek of boiling pitch and cooked sinew. Floodwaters drag away scholars still clinging to tablets, their faces blistering as they shout gospel into the rising tide. The Skywater archives, cathedral tall towers of rune-laced moonstone, crack open like eggs, spilling the inked bones of drowned archivists across the mire. Their collapse is not just ruinous, it is surgical annihilation, the systematic gutting of a people's memory, every glyph a vein severed. Not a cry remains, only bone flutes, drifting among reed-choked lagoons, played by the wind that once carried prayer. The vine-glass groans under ancestral weight, snapping like joints dislocated in a final death spasms. This is not conquest. This is liturgical vivisection. The firebrands are not conquerors. They are sacral executioners. Each hymn they sing is a dirge for a world deliberately and gruesomely unmade. This is not conquest. It is liturgical erasure. The firebrands do not loot, they immolate. Their judgment is a drowning psalm, and each verse drowns another prayer to the river gods, silencing the past to forge a singular future of storm-forged purity. The spirit-bonded carpenters, revered shapers of timber, who could sing ancient knots into sacred forms, are driven to extinction. Their breath once filled the wood with life. Now the timber shrinks, mute and splintered. In the marsh-shadowed grove of Relith Hollow, one such spirit-bonded carpenter, Elder Marnell, spent her final days weaving a prayer into the roots of a half-drowned elder pine. Her fingers, splintered and raw, traced a forgotten glyphs into the bark, while singing a lullaby older than the river's name. As the floodwaters rose, she continued her work, binding a memory of warmth and harvest into the timber's marrow. When the firebrands arrived, they found only stillness, her body submerged, her final breath locked within the tree, which now grows twisted and luminous, weeping amber when the moon wanes. The famed flood calendar of Narrowfen, a semi-sentient construct of woven bark and mirrored tide glass, once pulsed in time with the heavens. Now it lies shattered, its veins spilling sacred sap into the ashen canals. What remains is an elegy, scorched waterways, drowned ingenuity, and the hollow lament of river spirits severing their covenant. The water no longer sings. It whispers exile. Across the windswept, blood-soaked plains of Minos Tir, the proud bullmen tribes, colossal, stone-skinned warriors descended from the Earth God's wrath, launch a desperate, gruesome defense against enforced conversion. Each warrior is born of ritual forge fire, and those who survive this sacred agony may be chosen to join the Ember-Bound, a revered caste of battle seers and flame-bound judges believed to carry the voice of the Earth Gods. The Ember-Bound dwell in obsidian sanctuaries carved into active calderas, where they interpret tremors as omens and bleed themselves into volcanic fonts to commune with the molten divine. Their words shape law, their visions predict war, and their wrath is considered indistinguishable from prophecy. Their hides tempered in volcanic springs that scald the flesh and brand the soul. This searing baptism is not merely physical. It is a sacred agony, witnessed by a circle of ember-cloaked elders who chant from obsidian tablets inscribed with ancestral flames. The ritual is etched into living memory stone that records each scream, each tremor of transformation, ensuring that no warrior's trial is forgotten. These stones are placed in the Hall of Echoed Flame, where generations may commune with the pain and pride of their forebears, a communion with the volcanic breath of the Earth Gods themselves. Pain is revered as divine instruction, a crucible that burns away weakness and kindles the soul's true voice. The deeper the scorch, the clearer one's communion with the molten spirits said to dwell in the planet's core. Those who emerge unscarred are considered cursed, their silence a sign of rejection by the god fire. Those who scream in song are marked as blessed, for their agony is prophecy, and etched with spiraling sigils that glow only in battle, ignited by ancestral wrath. Their horns, sacred totems passed down through bloodlines, are carved with war chronicles and bound in cords of storm leather soaked in sacrificial blood. Culture here is a theocratic warrior shamanism, where every duel is both prayer and prophecy. The tribes live by the 9 horned codes, oaths such as the code of the spiraled vow, which demands vengeance unfulfilled, must echo through bloodlines, and the code of the silent tread, which forbids speech during battle to honor the storm's voice over the warriors. These edicts are etched into cave walls with blood ash, recited during rites of bone and thunder, etched into cave walls with blood ash, recited during rites of bone and thunder. Every warrior bears a war name earned in the labyrinth of breathless earth, a death trial beneath the plains that pits them against buried horrors and hallucinations from the god-blooded past. Their cloaks are thunder-woven, massive pelts stitched from the hides of sky beasts, crackling with latent lightning. In battle, They pulse and shimmer with stormlight, reacting to enemy presence with flickers of blue-white arcs or vibrating gusts of wind. When death nears, the cloaks emit low, harmonic thunder, a warning to nearby kin and a challenge to fate. Against cursed foes, the lightning intensifies, leaping from the fibers like wrathful spirits, seeking retribution. In moments of prophecy, the cloaks turn slate gray and stiffen, whispering wind songs only the Emberbound can interpret. Massive pelts stitched from the hides of sky beasts, crackling with latent lightning. Each cloak is earned through a rite known as the Storm Hunt, where initiates must ascend the tempest spires and slay a storm-marked beast whose roar can fracture stone. The hides are flayed beneath thunder moons and anointed with oils brewed from lightning-struck sap and volcanic ash. Before battle, shaman priests chant over them, binding fragments of storm spirits into the fibers, causing the cloaks to shudder with wind and static when danger nears. To wear one is to wrap oneself in the wrath of the sky and the cries of the hunted dead. On the battlefield, their formation resembles a living storm. They chant dirges that summon tremors, their hoof falls like seismic prayers, their horns locking with such force that bone splinters and air screams. When struck, their skin fractures like cracked marble, revealing glowing veins of ember-lit sinew, from which war ink seeps, living pigment that burns into enemy flesh on contact. Spears tipped in black obsidian, fossilized god bone, and meteor shard impale zealot invaders, who flail as their souls shrivel under the weight of ancestral judgment. The battlefield becomes a living altar of vengeance, slick with steaming gore, resonant with war songs that ripple across the hills like rolling thunder. This is no mere resistance. It is sacrament through slaughter, the holy wrath of a culture fighting not only for survival, but to preserve the sacred scream of its gods. At the sacred heart of their homeland, Vornak of the Endless Horn, towering and plated in carved basalt armor, holds the labyrinth of Thamros. The labyrinth's bloodstone walls echo with the cries of dying kin, and the sacred stomps of war dances performed amid slaughter. Wielding the maul of echoing steps, a colossal weapon that causes the stone to reverberate with sonic dread, Vornak becomes a living earthquake, pulping zealot invaders into shrieking wreckage. He fights while impaled, gouting fire-thick blood from his side, refusing to fall until the very foundation of the labyrinth begins to crack. The zealots surge like a plague tide under Zeal Lord Craven the Shard-Tongued, a monstrous figure clad in spiked ecclesiastical iron plate, etched with jagged runes of sacrificial invocation. His forked silver tongue flickers with arc lightning, exuding pulses of charged speech that infect the minds of all who hear him. Those closest to Craven often collapse in fits of divine madness, eyes rolling back, mouths vomiting scripture they do not know. Others suffer hallucinations of burning skies and bleeding altars, their will shredded by the resonant frequencies laced into his voice. The very air distorts around his words, bending light and warping perception, until the battlefield becomes a theater of fractured reality and creeping corruption, lashing the air as he bellows creeds of annihilation that strip bark from trees and curdle marrow. His voice is not shouted, but detonated, each word a psalmic detonation of divinity reimagined as ruin. His warriors descend like blasphemous wraiths, robed in stitched flesh drapes, tanned from the sanctified hides of those flayed in pre-battle sacrifice. Before each descent, they anoint themselves with relic ash, harvested from the bones of ancient martyrs, whispering mantras etched into the skin with ritual blades. Their armor is adorned not just in relics, but smeared with the ichor of slaughtered prophets, believed to call divine fury from the heavens. In shadowed shrines lit only by lightning, they chant over their weapons, baptizing them in storm-slick blood while reciting the 10 severances, verses said to sever the soul from mercy. Their descent is not an ambush. It is a procession of doom made manifest, skins of heretics and saints, sewn with threads spun from martyr hair. Their armor is a collage of shattered relics, fractured halos, broken icons, and jawbones of silenced prophets. From beneath ritual-etched helms, they chant profane mantras that deform the very wind, folding air into writhing glyph shapes that scream as they spiral. When Vornak is finally overwhelmed, his basalt armor cracked, his heart pierced with a thunder-tipped lance, he does not fall in silence, buried beneath the collapsing heart of the labyrinth. His death roar becomes a quake scream of such seismic fury that stone shatters and bone vaporizes. The echo alone flays skin from zealot ranks, and even the air recoils. His roar is not simply defiance. It is the death bell of an age, etched into the marrow of the earth. For 7 days, the storm above does not break. Instead, it hangs like a shroud of judgment, filled with low thunder that mimics Vornak's defiant roar. At dusk, the shattered ruins groan with ghostly chants, the war songs of a people slain but not silenced. Survivors hear them in dreams, as if the land itself mourns in fractured melody. Some interpret these lingering echoes as divine omens, guiding blades toward vengeance. Others whisper that the chants are curses, echoes of wrath-bound souls unable to rest, their lament warping the air and twisting fate. Pilgrims carve the chants into stone, hoping to summon their ancestors. Zealots plug their ears with blessed ash, fearing madness. The ruins do not sleep. They murmur, grieve, and conspire. To the east, the coastal kingdom of Elora, once a haven of crystalline observatories and sanctified roosts, now lies in desolation, its cliffside citadels shattered into jagged memorials of divine desecration. The eagle-blooded seers, draped in feathered robes woven with sky silk and storm glass, once interpreted celestial drift from the shimmer of distant constellations and the pulse of ocean winds. Their breath turned tides, their words guided the seasons. Elora's terraces, carved from moonstone and shaped like wings mid-flight, were etched with prophetic star maps and windward hymns, now buried beneath landslides of burning rubble. Siege engines crowned with Atlas's burning sigil thundered into the heights, dragged and operated by grotesque crews of ash-daubed zealot engineers, flesh-scarred artisans who whisper to their war machines as if to gods. Their arms are sleeved in chains inscribed with invocation glyphs, their eyes replaced with smoldering crystal orbs that pulse in rhythm with the engine's chants. Some are fanatics who offered their flesh for iron fusion, while others are prisoners remade by ritual mutilation and fused into the bone mechanisms as living ballast. They feed the machines with storm blood and cinder resin, believing each launch sanctifies the world in fire and obliteration, hurling pyre orbs that shattered domes of oracular crystal and tore the songspire rookeries from their moorings. Feathered corpses rained like charred prayers, each one ritually anointed in stardust oil and sky ink before death. their feathers inscribed with ancestral prophecies meant to guide their souls to the heavens. But now, blackened and broken, their descent is seen not as a passage to the divine, but as a blasphemous omen. Their twisted forms catch in the branches and battlements, twitching as if still mid-flight, eyes wide and unseeing, mouths frozen in silent screams of cosmic betrayal. The eyrie of broken moons, last stronghold of sky faith, buckled beneath a barrage of thunderbolts, hurled from god-engraved trebuchets. Seer Matron Thal-Veren, veiled in lightning-bleached plumage and bearing the eye of the ninth wind, had prophesied a celestial rupture, a sky unmade by its own voice. Her warnings, dismissed as poetic heresy, earned her exile by the Council of Talons, who bound her wings in silence runes and hurled her from the sacred ledge. Her shattered staff remains lodged in the cliff face, its pale blue flames flickering with uncanny rhythm. Around it, the land has grown strangely twisted, trees bend toward it as if in supplication, their leaves etched with frost patterns even in high summer. The earth blackens in spirals, and the wind constantly circles the spot, refusing to cross it. Storms gather unnaturally above, drawn to the staff like carrion birds to a corpse. Pilgrims report hearing the sound of weeping stars, while beasts avoid the area entirely. It has become a shrine and a warning, a locus of ruined prophecy carved into the bones of the world, humming with residual foresight and wreathed in pale blue fire that dances to the rhythm of winds long dead. Those who dare approach are racked with seizures of sight, visions of celestial unraveling, forgotten prophecies, and screaming stars. The unworthy are scorched to the bone, their minds peeled back and left gibbering beneath the cliff's shadow. Yet the faithful who touch it and survive emerge transformed, their eyes burned white with insight, their voices cracked with the weight of 1,000 whispered futures, humming with residual foresight, glowing with unspoken screams. Her fall echoes endlessly in the wind. Now the zealots carve jagged lightning runes into the skin of the cliffs, stitching profanity into the bones of the land. They chant scripture soaked in sky ash, their voices blending with the shrieking gusts as they proclaim that the heavens have been unseamed, and that the gods now see only through the storm. In Iolora, the wind once brought visions. Now it carries only smoke and the laughter of thunder. Even the underwater city-states of Vaskir, where the Selachin, shark-like semi-aquatic warriors, once carved storm hymns into coral pillars that pulsed with bioluminescent rhythm and held blood rites beneath moonlit tides, were not spared the firestorms from above. The coral cathedrals, monolithic structures etched with baroque friezes of tide spirits and abyssal saints, once alive with chromatic pulses and echo chant resonances, crumbled into molten ruin. Their stained glass windows, composed of pressure-forged gem sands, depicted grim tableaus of divine drowning and leviathan penance, now shattered into spectral fragments. Yet not all was lost. A lone priest, Orvash Tide Chant, his gills seared into blackened ridges, his voice a rasping echo of once melodic chants, now scorched to ruin by scalding steam, clawed his way from the collapse of the trench spire's innermost sanctum. Clutched in his blistered, webbed hands was a shard of the sanctum flame, an ever-flickering ember encased within a spheroid of tidal glass, etched with sorrow sigils and swirling with the ghost light of drowned prophets. The glass pulses faintly with the breath of some unseen depth, as though inhaling memory. Alongside it, wrapped in the desiccated scales of a holy eel, he carried the final verse of the Abyssal Covenant, not written, but impressed into a living parchment of tide beast skin, its glyphs shifting with the pulse of ancient currents. This verse, forbidden and eternal, is said to awaken the memory of the old tides from the bones of the world. A deep, ancestral ache that murmurs through salt-blooded veins and summons forgotten seas to rise in mourning and judgment. Now Orvash haunts drowned reefs draped in kelp shrouds like funereal veils, gathering those displaced and broken, wayward survivors, scarred remnants of the Leviathan Guard, and dream-struck pilgrims who claim the sea itself murmurs vengeance in its currents. Together they seek a trench temple lost to myth, said to lie beneath the barnacle-ridden ribs of a god whale slain in the first drowning. But Orvash is not alone in his quest. Other factions, driven by fractured interpretations of the Abyssal Covenant, now converge upon the depths. The sect of the Veiled Maw believes the temple holds a relic capable of collapsing the surface world into tidal oblivion. The Coral Ascendants, seers of decay and renewal, seek to crown a tide-born sovereign from among their bloodline, interpreting the Covenant as a divine birthright. And from the shattered halls of the Atlantean disciples comes a splintered war cult, armed with relic staves and prophecy blades, preaching that only through blood ritual in the trench can the drowned god be reborn. What was once a lonely pilgrimage has become a sunken theater of divine contest, each belief a tide, each ambition a riptide, poised to drag the world below. The trench temple itself is rumored to be a monument of unimaginable scale, constructed from the ribcage of a drowned sky whale, with spires shaped from fossilized lightning and vaults that drip brine, infused with prophetic static. Coral saints with open mouths line the passageways, forever screaming in silence. The threshold is sealed by a conch gate that bleeds memory oil when touched, and within its sanctum lies the heart censer, an ancient relic said to beat in rhythm with Atlas's first thunder, encased in chains of blood iron and lit by drowned flame. There, Orvash hopes to rekindle that flame and awaken a tide no storm-born lightning can cage. In the wake of their ruin, the survivors, now called the Drowned Ember Covenant, retreated into abyssal trenches where no sun dares pierce. In silence, they forge pacts in blood and brine, whispering to leviathans with scars that map forgotten wars, and sea spirits whose voices corrode sanity. Among these deep gods is Thal-Veren, the cracked fin oracle, a behemoth whose flanks bear fused coral runes and ember burns that pulse in patterns only the mad can interpret. His form is a cathedral unto itself. Vaulted bones, grottos of translucent bone marrow windows, and spiraling barnacle steeples crowned with lampfish halos. His sermons manifest as dream plagues, seeping into the minds of sleeping acolytes and twisting their visions into choral madness, tides of whispering voices, drowned hymns sung in reverse, and glimpses of a sea within sea, where time is a spiraling eddy of regret and revelation. These revelations leave marks, gill scars where none grew before, tongues that taste lightning, and the constant aching sense of being watched from the deep. Over time, these marks fester. The gill scars pulse with phantom tides, leaking brine that smells of ancient death. Tongues wither into forked tendrils, lashing involuntarily during storms. The afflicted whisper prophecies in forgotten dialects and tear salt from their eyes in sleep, their bones aching with a memory not their own. Madness takes root in spirals, not frenzied, but methodical. as if the mind were being retuned to some abyssal chord. Some carve tide glyphs into their own flesh to relieve the pressure. Others vanish into the trench, their last words not screams, but sacred gurgles of obedience. A behemoth whose flanks bear fused coral runes and ember burns that pulse in patterns only the mad can interpret. His form is a cathedral unto itself. Vaulted bones, grottos of translucent bone marrow windows, and spiraling barnacle steeples crowned with lampfish halos. Their war priest, Varkol the deep-toothed, mouth ringed with rune-etched teeth, some chipped and blackened from ritual gnawing of coral relics, and breath heavy with the incense of crushed sea roses and fermented blood-rack, led the last stand from the trench-spire basilica, a baroque monument of drowned god worship, crowned by a dome of star shells and abyssal stained glass, depicting saints weeping brine and leviathans impaled upon divine tridents. His blade, forged from the calcified fang of a drowned god, screamed with each strike, a bone howl that echoed like a choir of drowned children, gasping for breath. Each impact burst into plumes of black-red ichor that sizzled against the basilica's sanctified stones. Beside him surged Admiral Caress Tidebreaker, matriarch of the Leviathan Guard, her black pearl armor slick with sacred oil and groaning under the weight of chained votive skulls, each inscribed with prayers carved by fingernail. Her tridents vibrated with abyssal hymns and ended lives in gory spirals of steaming gore, each strike a sacrament of punishment. As lightning struck, like divine spears, and boiled the sea into shrieking steam, Varkal roared the final litany of the depths, a gurgling, salt-thick chant that ruptured the ears of nearby foes and shattered coral from sheer force. Caress, eyes burning with tide sight, fought not for vengeance alone, but with the zealous clarity of one ordained. To her, this slaughter was not a battle, but an absolution, a ritual of blood and brine to atone for the sins of survival. Her heart, long fossilized by command, pulsed with the rhythm of sacred fury. Each whirlpool she conjured tore through ships with a fanatic's precision, and as hulls shattered and screams drowned beneath waves, her voice rose, not in rage, but in ecstatic hymn. She was the storm's confessor, and in her wrath she sought communion with the divine depths, believing each death a step closer to the sea god's redemption or judgment. But the basilica fell. Its dome imploded in a shriek of imploding pressure and stained glass shrapnel, slicing through choral saints and the screaming throats of prayer-chanting acolytes. Coral groves blistered and died in agony, their polyps bursting like boils under scalding lightning surges. The Leviathan Guard was scattered like blood through current, armor peeled from bone, eyes boiled within sockets, and sacred banners unraveling into ash as abyssal firestorm clashed with ancient tide magic. Then came the Zealots, warriors of the Atlantean disciples, adorned in rust-black scale armor, veined with pulsing scripture runes, their faces obscured behind helm masks forged in the semblance of drowning saints. With bone harpoons and shard censers swinging from hooked chains, they surged into the ruined basilica, chanting their blood litany in tongues that tore at the sanity of listeners. They showed no mercy, slicing open singing priests and crushing reliquaries beneath bladed boots, smearing sacred oils with gory fervor. One zealot, broad-shouldered and glowing with storm-blood stigmata, dragged a writhing monk to the altar and flayed him alive, writing prophetic verses into the screaming man's skin with a relic stylus. Another shattered an aquifer font, and drank the memory-infused water laced with ashes of drowned saints, frothing and speaking with the voice of a forgotten Tide Prince before his skull burst in luminous rupture. Now pilgrims bring lightning into the deep, luminous invaders who tether divine wrath to copper sigils and drag sanctity down in rusted chains. They trespass among ruins where songs once flowed, like kelp tangles through cathedrals of bioluminescent devotion, and instead leave only char and sacrilege. What was once a cradle of communion, a cathedral of flowing prayer carved from living coral and hymnal shell, is now a graveyard of steam-scorched relics, shattered relic crypts, and the drifting bones of choir monks. The sea, ancient and vast, betrays her faithful, not with silence, but with memory. Her waters churn with ghost voices, salt-thick lamentations, and wrath yet unspent, like a noose of currents, tightening ever so slowly around the necks of those who dared desecrate her sanctum. The ancient forests of Ellenweath, home to the last free elves, burn at the roots, where obsidian-black tendrils curl upward from the scorched earth, like the fingers of dying gods clawing for sky. Flames bloom in unnatural hues, bruised violet, sulfuric green, and a red so deep it hums like a wound, searing through root veins that once carried song and memory. The air reeks of scorched soulwood and sanctified sap, a perfume of agony that makes even the winds weep ash in spiraling dirges. As their tree temples are felled, groaning like dying titans beneath the weight of a sky turned traitor, celestial phenomena rupture above. Blood comets trailing morn song and fire, and mirrored constellations cracking as if the heavens grieve. Each collapse is a liturgical catastrophe. Branches crack like snapped harp strings, releasing dissonant shockwaves that reverberate through root and canopy. As they fall, runes carved into their bark erupt in flares of violet flame, igniting cascades of ancestral light that shimmer and writhe before vanishing into screams. The ground convulses with each impact, disgorging buried relics that howl open-mouthed, as if mourning their unearthing, spilling out glimmers of forgotten epochs in shards of dreamstone, where once stood sanctuaries sung into shape by millennia of magic, now gape voids that pulse like fresh wounds in the world's skin. The silver-leafed canopies, once sung into bloom by elder druids, collapse in smoldering ruin, their petals curling into ash ribbons that spiral like weeping banners in the infernal breeze. Eldritch wards flicker out like dying stars as centuries-old caretakers fall trying to hold the last sanctums, their bodies turning to salt and soot, songs thousands of years old, laments of stars, rivers, and forgotten gods, are silenced in a single night, leaving behind a void that thrums with residual grief, like the afterimage of light when a star dies. The glades, where they once echoed, now shimmer with fractured echoes, ghost harmonies that fracture the minds of those who listen too closely. Dew forms from sorrow, and even the moonlight recoils, refracting into shards that dance like dying spirits above the ash-soaked soil. Their final verses are sung by Lyrian Starcall, the last moon voice of Ellenweath, her voice tremulous with grief and yet ablaze with celestial wrath. Her eyes stream silver as she clutches her burning harp, fingers blistering but unrelenting, her melodies rising in defiance as much as mourning. Each note carries the weight of millennia, a requiem and a curse, unraveling the ancient harmonies into a final, radiant scream of sorrow that ripples through ash, root, and star alike. As her harp of living wood burns in her arms, she sings a parting ode to the cosmos, and when her voice breaks, So too does the ancient lineage of sung magic. The zealots carve lightning sigils into the trunks of sacred trees with blades forged from star iron and tempered in storm fire, clad in ritual armor resembling the cracked flesh of thunderheads. Their helms are wrought in the likeness of Atlas's anguished visage, mouths agape in silent command, eyes burning with static flame. Each incision into bark is accompanied by a guttural chant, part invocation, part defilement, echoing like thunder trapped in hollow bone. Their robes, stitched from the flayed hides of heretic druids, flicker with runes that pulse to an unseen rhythm, and their limbs move with an unholy precision, as though guided by divine puppetry. They are avatars of tempest and tyranny, and the sacred groves scream with every step they take. They force captured elven children to chant Atlas's name under threat of flame. Some chant in trembling monotones, eyes vacant as if hollowed by trauma, while others weep openly, their voices cracking as they mouth words of a god they do not know. A few, defiant, raise their voices in ancient harmonies, fragments of cradle songs and protective wards, before being silenced in fire. Their cries twist through the air, mingling with smoke and ash, forming a discordant hymn that scars the grove with lingering sorrow. Those who resist are bound to the roots and burned alive, their ashes scattered among the elder groves, where the wind now sings only dirges. Magic, memory at the mercy, are all set ablaze. Elven relics of starlight and moonstone shatter into screaming shards, their protective enchantments warping mid-incantation to lash out blindly or implode in sorrowful bursts. Wards etched into ancient bark twist into blasphemous runes, their glow turning from silver to searing rust. Spirits once bound in harmony to grove and glyph awaken malformed, their whispers curdled into keening howls, flickering through the smoke like fractured halos dragged through torment. What was sacred warps into sacrilege, and the divine bleeds with its stewards. The sounds of destruction yield at last, replaced by the hiss of flame and the crash of falling giants. In the smoldering silence that follows, the charred groves whisper elegies in crackling tongues, as if the trees themselves mourn through fire. The sky, once shield to the glades, now weeps crimson lightning across the ashen canopy. From the ruins, pale motes drift upward, like souls unmoored, circling in spiral patterns before dissolving into a mournful dusk. Nothing moves but memory, and even that falters, scorched at the edges by the desecration. And still, the zealots chant. Zealots chanting, Lord of Lightning, Demon of the frozen wastes, the conqueror of the magma fields, the sky's wrath. And this belief, born of blood and thunder, devours all. And in the eyes of these zealots, mercy is heresy. The sieges of these lands do not come in a single night. They unfold in the months after the great battle, wave after wave of blood and belief. Long after the storm over the red dune fades, columns of fire and smoke mark each new conquest, and with them the land itself begins to twist. Crops wither in fields salted by ash, their stalks twisting into brittle, skeletal shapes that rattle in the scorched wind like funeral chimes. Seasons unravel in erratic cycles of drought and hail, with summer skies choked in sulfur clouds and winters that bleed sleet sharp enough to flay bark. Rivers run in reverse for days, dragging corpses of drowned beasts and blighted reeds upstream, their currents moaning with a sound like distant weeping. Above, the skies swirl with unnatural hues, bruise purple, storm yellow, and an ochre red that never fades, while flocks of once migratory birds spiral endlessly in circles, their cries broken and erratic, as if repeating forgotten omens. Animals birth malformed offspring or flee into the seas, and those who remain gnaw at stones as if they remember a taste lost to war. As thunder splits the sky without end, forests turn to blackened husks that whisper madness, and once sacred glades bloom only poison. Even the soil forgets peace, trembling with each footfall of zealotry. Cracks open like wounded mouths, exhaling steam laced with whispers that mirror the madness of those above. Ash worms writhe and knot beneath the surface, forming brief glyphs of forgotten curses before dissolving. In some places, blood seeps upward instead of water, pooling into crimson scrying mirrors that reflect not the sky, but distant, burning cities. The land, once fertile, now groans audibly at night, as if attempting to expel the weight of divine desecration pressed into its spine. Resistance mounts, but it is disorganized. Scholars, monks, warrior clans, and mystics rise only to fall before the iron will of Atlas's name. Among the zealots, new warbands emerge to claim divine recognition through increasingly brutal means. The Ember Saints of Renhol cleanse entire cities by fire, claiming to witness living flame miracles where the blaze dances in humanoid forms, interpreted as signs of Atlas's presence. They gather crowds before each purge, declaring natural disasters like firestorms and volcanic tremors as divine affirmations. Entire districts are immolated in ceremonial arcs, their screams called choruses of devotion. To the saints, each conflagration is not destruction, but spectacle, liturgy, and proof that faith is flame incarnate, offering the smoke as proof of their devotion. The smoke rises in spiraling columns of amethyst and ember red, curling like spectral limbs toward a sky bruised with thunder. It smells of charred incense, scorched marrow, and the bitter tang of sanctified blood. Where it passes, birds fall silent, and the light takes on a sickly sheen, casting flickering shadows that mimic forgotten saints mid-lament. Witnesses claim the smoke whispers names of those not yet dead, a spectral ledger of sacrifice in motion. The thunderbound duelists of Graldenheim challenge survivors to ritual combat beneath storm-racked skies, claiming each kill as a blessing earned by strength. The searing choir of Mirosyn chants continuously as they march, their lips stitched with copper thread, believing silence to be sacrilege. Each warband seeks not only conquest, but the gods' attention, branding their flesh with lightning glyphs, flaying sections of skin to reveal scarred verses written in tongues lost to time, or implanting shards of relic metal beneath their skin so that every movement sings a hymn of pain. Helmets are forged to resemble screaming saints or weeping martyrs, often adorned with chains that drag sacred debris. Fragments of shattered altars, bone chimes, or scorched relic fabrics. Victims are similarly marked, tongues branded with sigils, eyes sewn open with storm thread, or corpses impaled on icon spires as offerings. In some warbands, warriors anoint themselves in the blood of their predecessors, mixing it with sanctified pitch and ash to paint sermons across their armor. These adornments are not decoration. They are declarations of unholy gospel, where appearance is an extension of doctrine, and horror is its proof, or hammering copper nails into their bones to mimic divine pain. Some flay the skins of their victims and wear them as cloaks of martyrdom, inscribed with burned-in verses of corrupted scripture. Others construct totems from severed limbs and storm glass shards, erected on bloodied altars as offerings of grotesque devotion. Their battle cries are symphonies of agony, each note reverberating with a frequency that gnaws at sanity and muscle alike. Enemies clutch their ears as visions erupt behind their eyes. Storm-racked plains of bone, endless pyres, gods weeping blood from torn skies. Some fall to their knees mid-charge, weeping uncontrollably or screaming back prayers not their own. Others freeze, caught in trance, eyes rolling as they witness imagined destinies of fire and ash. The sound sears deeper than steel, a psychic rays that unravels resolve, leaving only submission or frenzy, choreographed with thunder and wreathed in pyrotechnic displays of sacred fire and sacrilege. In these displays of faith through horror, the aesthetic becomes a theology, baroque, brutal, and absolute. And from within the rogue heresies of thunder, one name rises like smoke over ash: Seraphine Blightwake, the Shard Veiled, a silhouette of broken sanctity and spectral dread. Her veils are lattices of jagged crystal, each shard inscribed with reversed scripture and slick with sacrificial ichor, arranged in cascading layers that shimmer like glass, drowned in oil. They obscure her face entirely, reflecting torment in fractured mosaics to any who dare look. Beneath the veils, her body is cloaked in robes woven from flayed vocal cords and blackened vellum scrolls, whispering prayers in dying tongues as she moves. Her martyrs, known as the Silent Procession, are tongueless acolytes wrapped in prayer flesh and ash cloth, their eyes sewn with silver thread, their limbs stiff from repeated anointings in sacred tar. When Seraphine performs a miracle, the air warps, sound folds inward, shadows bleed upward, and a storm-glass halo ignites behind her, like a crown of weeping stars. Once a high priestess of the orthodox flame, she renounced the sanctioned doctrine, after claiming to receive visions through the screams of the dying. Now adorned in cracked crystal veils, and trailed by silence-bound martyrs, she commands the sect of hollow praise, a splinter cult that sacrifices sound itself in exchange for what they call the true echo. Her miracles are feared, even by other zealots. Those who witness them speak of sensations both divine and diseased, an ecstasy too sharp to endure. Inverted lightning consumes its victims from within, their veins glowing like glass filaments before they shatter into steaming dust. Her voice, rarely heard, burns the lungs of listeners, leaving them gasping, bloodied, their throats lined with crystalline ash. Prayers intoned in her presence twist the tongues of zealots into knots of thorns, rotting the flesh, even as they speak holy names. Some leave her rituals blind, the others never speak again, and a few begin to mirror her veils in flesh, spontaneously manifesting crystalline growths as if marked by divine contagion. Through her, the storm becomes infection, sanctity transfigured into blight, inverted lightning that consumes from within, voices that burn the lungs, and prayers that rot the tongue. Through her, the storm begins to devour its own, and in doing so, they turn the crusade into a furnace of unrelenting zeal. Yet even within the zeal, fractures form. Some sects break from Atlas's doctrine entirely, forming heresies of thunder, rogue factions who claim new revelations or hidden truths within the storm. The splintered veil worship a silent version of Atlas who speaks only through ruin, while the storm reckoners of Ilvath believe in selective purification and wage war only under eclipses. Their twisted miracles, raining glass, reverse lightning, bleeding winds, rival even the sanctioned horrors. the crusade no longer marches as one. It spirals. Scholars, monks, warrior clans, and mystics rise only to fall before the iron will of Atlas's name. In some lands, defenders take to guerrilla warfare, carving lightning sigils into their own chests as wards of defiance. In others, broken kings offer themselves in sacrifice to delay the slaughter of their people. In Ellenwith, a lone druid named Mirren Flamebark burns herself alive within the heart tree, her body wrapped in robes stitched from skybloom petals, her antlers wound with twilight ivy. As the sacred bark ignites, her eyes gleam not with fear, but with a lucid defiance, as if glimpsing a truth too immense for the waking world. She whispers a final vision to the roots, of a forest reborn from ruin, of antlered shadows walking beneath obsidian stars. When she screams, "May the roots drink lightning, and the sky never bloom again." Her voice splits the air like prophecy. The heart tree groans, a sound deeper than thunder, and its bark fractures with luminous veins of silver. From the wound flows sap like moonlit sorrow, pooling into runes of mourning etched by nature itself. The winds that rise are not of this world. They carry not only ash, but voices, thousands layered, echoing Mirren's curse across the dying forest. Trees creak in reply, their branches twisting into sigils of remembrance. Where her body falls, a flower blooms of black crystal and flickering firelight. The heart tree dims, but within its roots, something ancient stirs, not death, but a memory too wild to forget. Within the heart tree, her body wrapped in robes stitched from skybloom petals, her antlers wound with twilight ivy. As the sacred bark ignites, she cries out, "May the roots drink lightning, and the sky never bloom again." Her scream merges with the tree's groan as ancient magic fractures. Her death cracks the bark of the heart tree down its center. A wound that bleeds sap the color of moonlight, which flows like tears into the scorched roots. Winds howl through the glade, carrying her curse across the dying forest, and every branch touched by the smoke curls inward as if in grief. The tree's glow dims, but never fades, a silent beacon of defiance and mourning. In Minos Tir, the last labyrinth guard, a horn-crowned sentinel, known only as Damarus, stands atop a tower of corpses, their bodies twisted into grotesque spirals and cruciform displays within the shattered heart of the labyrinth of Thamros, where blood seeps perpetually from fractured obsidian walls, pooling in sigils no hand remembers carving, and the air itself hums with the forgotten anguish of stone carved into madness. Thunder churns above, a storm birthed from Atlas's own fury, casting violet shadows over the blood-slick stones. Around him lie the fallen, zealots marked in ash and kin, carved from marble flesh, their bodies torn by glaives, edged in screaming steel, and shields blazoned with labyrinthine despair. Among them were famed zealots, abominations of devotion clad in sanctified horror. The tri-veiled apostle, whose face had been stitched shut with strands of holy sinew, emitting guttural hymns through the seams as he flayed the dying with a blade of fused martyr bone and black gold. The hollow warden, whose torso was a cathedral cage, where the still living torsos of condemned seers howled eternal liturgies. And the blood-lit saint, her skin translucent and aglow with molten scripture, veins pulsing with divine napalm as she wept stigmata that ignited anything they touched. The clash was symphonic carnage. War horns brayed like dying titans, and every footstep echoed with iron dirge. Damaris cleaved through the horde, with a blade forged from minotaur bone, its edge exhaling clouds of ancestor wail with each swing. Blood, black as void ink, sprayed in geometric patterns across shattered runes, and flame-belching lances split air and body alike. Flesh split like ripe fruit, viscera cascading in steaming torrents, painting the labyrinth's stones with a mural of shrieking agony. Severed limbs thrashed, as if unwilling to die, and faces melted beneath caustic flame, eyes popping like blistered orbs in the furnace of faith. The zealots chanted as they advanced, tongues aflame with scripture and madness, impaling the dying on relic spears that hummed with soul thirst. Bone crushers ground rib cages into symphonic mulch beneath gilded boots, each crunch releasing a wet harmonic shriek that echoed like tortured music through the crumbling halls. The sound gnawed at the edge of consciousness, unraveling the nerves of those who heard it. Some wept uncontrollably, others fell into fugue states, muttering fractured prayers to absent gods. Even the zealots, entranced in fervor, twitched as if the echoes clawed at their sanity, a discordant hymn of desecration that reverberated through marrow and memory alike. And shriek torches set corpses ablaze in waves of screaming phosphor. Damaris's horn bellowed once, a sound so mournful it made the walls shudder and the storm recoil, and then he roared not merely defiance but lament. A final echo of a culture erased, of blood paint rituals drawn at dawn with ancestral ash, of choral rites sung in spirals beneath moonstone arches, of oaths sworn upon labyrinthine blades etched with the names of dream walkers. These were songs not just of survival, but of memory, of identity braided into stone, and silence, now extinguished beneath the zealots' ash-crusted boots, as the chant of the zealots encircles the labyrinth's breach. Lightning strikes the tower, reducing it to rubble in a cascade of deafening cracks and violet flame. The stone disintegrates in slow motion, each fragment spiraling upward as if resisting gravity, howling with the echo of Damaris's final cry. As dust chokes the air, a ghostly imprint of the tower lingers, sculpted from stormlight and grief, before collapsing inward like a dying breath. Ash rains in concentric circles, and the air is filled with the scent of scorched devotion and smoldering memory. Yet beneath the ruin, Damaris's horn remains unbroken, embedded in stone like a relic defying the silence to come. Still, the chant continues. Still, the crusade rolls on. Thanks for venturing into the storm with me. Every tale in this universe, from the shattered kingdoms to the cursed bloodlines, I write myself. All the art, all the visuals, every drop of atmosphere you feel, that's shaped by hand and pieced together with my passion to create. These stories take a lot of time to make real, so thank you for your patience when the drops take longer than I'd like. If you felt something during this journey, if you got goosebumps, held your breath, or just needed a break from the noise of the real world, do me a solid, like the video, subscribe for more, and share it with a nerdy friend who needs to touch grass, or get scorched by Atlas's lightning. Your support keeps this storm alive.